I'd like to start a series where I do an in-depth analysis of the lightsaber duels of the Star Wars films. I have experience with both European fencing and Japanese kendo, the two main pillars on which lightsaber combat was based, so I'd like to put that experience to use. I'd like to go chronologically through the development of lightsaber combat, meaning I'm starting with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader aboard the Death Star in Star Wars A New Hope. Peter Diamond was the stunt coordinator for episodes 4 and 5, and is credited as creating the first appearance of lightsaber combat, which would later be classified as Gemso and Suresu. Peter Diamond had an extensive history of choreographed fights, but not many with swords. He was the stunt coordinator of the Zorro TV series, but that came out in 1990, so well after Star Wars. As such, I'm not really sure what experience he has with anything resembling actual swordsmanship. Considering many colleges, especially ones for actors, used to require fencing, and that Peter Diamond went to the very prestigious Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, I find it very likely that he had some basic knowledge of either academic or sport fencing. If anyone is asking, what about the Olympic fencer Bob Anderson? He didn't get involved in Star Wars until The Empire Strikes Back, so had no influence on the very first lightsaber duel. Who we do have are Sir Alec Guinness and David Prowse, who seem to have done their own stunts for this scene. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Guinness, similar to Diamond, had some background with fencing, especially as a Shakespearean actor. Yet this may have limited his experience to stage fencing, which is a far cry from anything real, made simply to look impressive while having no real substance. David Prowse, however, was noted to be unskilled, leading to many a broken prop and him being replaced by Bob Anderson in the second film. What's more, his costume was bulky and didn't have the best visibility, doubtlessly adding to Prowse's difficulty. So, for our very first duel, we have Alec Guinness versus David Prowse under the direction of Peter Diamond. They range from minor to no background in European fencing, and no experience in Japanese kendo. Thus, though Japanese swordsmanship was clearly the intended influence, there can be no surprise that Peter Diamond and the actors leaned more towards European influences. So let us begin. Once the two fighters come into range of each other, they raise their lightsabers to a threatening guard with the points of their blades roughly at eye level. This is a good position to either strike or block, so is often the recommended place to hold your sword during a fight. Of course, subverting expectations is always encouraged in martial arts, but this is a perfect position to be in for combat. We can see Obi-Wan's stance is very lax here. His feet are close together, which makes it harder to move and change directions quickly, and his arms are close to his chest. An ideal position for his arms would be more forward. Think of a goalie in soccer. You don't stand in the net to defend it, but out in front of it. In the same way, it's best to hold your blade out in front of you to defend yourself. Not fully extended. A goalie can't defend the net at all if he's too far away from it, but some distance is required. Darth Vader appears to have his left shoulder forward. As a right-handed swordsman, this would only make sense if he was holding a shield in his left hand. Even in two-handed swordplay, the dominant hand is forward to allow easier mobility and greater reach. This first move can be interpreted in two ways, a favorable one and an unfavorable one. The favorable explanation is that Obi-Wan is beginning the duel with an indirect attack. Rather than going straight forward towards Vader with his attack, he drops his blade down. This is a way to subvert expectations. Normal attacks go towards the body, thus, as soon as Obi-Wan moves, Vader would move his blade to intercept his. But by moving down first, Kenobi can duck under Vader's blade, and then move forward to strike. So, instead of attack block, it's false attack block real attack. The only issue is, Vader doesn't block after Obi-Wan's false attack. As we're being favorable, we'll assume Vader realizes this is a trick, and so waits for the real attack before making his defense. This type of exchange of making and calling bluffs is very typical of actual martial arts, so I would give this 2 merits if I thought that's what's actually happening here. Unfortunately, there's a more probable explanation. A common mistake amateur martial artists make is winding up before their attack. That is, moving away from the target before moving towards it. This is often instinctual, trying to gain momentum by lengthening the strike. Batters often do this. After all, the more time swinging the bat, the more speed and power you can build up into the swing. Unfortunately in martial arts, the precious milliseconds spent pulling back present an opening for your opponent to exploit. Alec Guinness doesn't look like he's performing a deceptive, false attack, but that he's winding up, taking too long to perform a simple direct attack. Prowse waits not because he sees through Guinness's deception, but because he's waiting for his cue. Had this been a real duel, if Vader moved his blade forward in a direct attack, he would kill Obi-Wan before Obi-Wan completed his attack because he performed 2 moves, down and up, instead of just 1. I would like to take the favorable view, but this looks far too much like a mistake for me to see it as anything else. This action also has Obi-Wan end his attack with his arm still bent. The distance between these 2 fighters is hard to tell at this angle, but the fact that Obi-Wan makes his attack without fully extending his arms means one of 2 things. 1, they're way too close. Getting close to your opponent is dangerous. Why? Because he has a lightsaber. If you wait until you're close to hit your opponent, but he fully extends to hit you while you're still far away, he will hit you first, and then you'll be dead before you can make your attack. As with all things in martial arts, this isn't 100% true. There can be times when closing the distance is a good thing, but right now both fighters are on guard, their blades at the ready, pointed threateningly at their opponent. Do you really think they're just going to mutually agree not to hit each other while they get closer and closer? Once their opponent is in range, they should be starting their attack. Yet I think the reason for this action is more likely to be option 2. Alec Guinness is attacking Prowse's lightsaber, not him. This is another common mistake beginners make, especially in acting. You don't want to actually hit your opponent, so you don't actually try. Instead, you aim at your opponent's blade. That's close enough, right? No one will actually notice. Well, once blocked, Obi-Wan turns to attack low at Vader's legs, which Vader appropriately blocks. Vader turns this block into a counter, striking at Obi-Wan's head, which Obi-Wan blocks. This exchange has nothing wholly remarkable about it one way or another. Their guards are still not the best, but I'm not going to deal out demerits for the same thing twice. The 2 combatants end up with their hands close together, so Vader pushes Obi-Wan back. This is an actual move in kendo when fighters get too close. It opens up the distance and can off-balance the opponent. This isn't that horribly unsound locking of the blades that is so popular in Star Wars. It's just a short clash with an immediate follow-up. Vader then performs 2 thrusts, which is a good thing. He's created an opening, so for him not to follow up with an attack would be strange. So Vader does make an attack, and when Kenobi blocks it, he performs a second attack, still hoping to capitalize on the opening he made with his push. Very sound tactics to keep the pressure on. Though his tactics are sound, Vader's movements aren't. He lurches forward with his thrusts, his body moving at an uneven pace. First his feet, then his head. His head even bobs forward, leaning over. This is horrible form, and very reminiscent of a beginner, or perhaps someone in a very heavy costume who can't see or move easily. Whatever the reason, these are awkward and clumsy motions which telegraph his movements and put him in too vulnerable a position to be taken seriously. Let's try spinning. I hear that's a good trick. Wrong. It is such a bad move. Here, let's move my blade, the thing I'm defending myself with, out of the way. Let's expose my entire arm for Vader to chop off. No, wait, that's not enough. Let's expose my entire back so he can just kill me any way he wants to. We can throw my other arm in for extra measure so he can cut that off too after he's killed me. Obi-Wan then redoubles his attack, which is a fine move, but he attacks the exact same place he just attacked. Attacking a second time is a great move to surprise your opponent. They stopped your first attack, so turn their thoughts from defense to offense. But your first attack isn't actually done, so catches them off guard. But surprising your opponent doesn't really work if they don't have to do anything to stop you. Vader already defended that line of attack, so to attack that same line while he's defending it does nothing. Obi-Wan then makes another attack, this time to a new line, so good on him for realizing you can't keep attacking the same spot. They lock blades for a little bit, but Obi-Wan then shows why locking blades is stupid as he just glides his blade forward to an attack. I'm gonna give some merit here, not because this is so amazing, but just because Star Wars gets this wrong so frequently that it's notable that here, at the beginning, they actually get blade locks right. Vader then makes a very low attack, which Kenobi counters into a body shot, which Vader blocks. This is all fine, but then the two get into a blade lock, pushing against each other's lightsaber for no reason and with no purpose after Obi-Wan just showed why blade locks don't work. There is absolutely no reason to wrestle with your opponent's blade. If you're both pushing and pushing on each other's blades, then move your blade out of the way. Let your opponent shove and push as much as he likes, and as his momentum carries him off, hit him and end the fight. Vader swings wide, and Kenobi takes the opportunity to reposition. And since he's finally brought positioning into this fight, let's talk about that. Martial arts don't just consist of two fighters standing opposite each other, hitting and blocking. They are mobile. Footwork, distance, positioning, these are essential to martial arts. So the fact that it's only now that we're seeing any real movement means this duel is severely lacking in mobility. As Obi-Wan repositions, their blades briefly touch. Then Obi-Wan circles his blade a few times, keeping the point always forward in a threatening position. In swordsmanship, the blade is an extension of the body, acting like a cat's whiskers or an insect's antenna. They are used to feel the movements and distance of your opponent, so the light touching of the blades is very accurate and can be used to feel out your opponent's movements. The circular motions are also helpful to disguise Kenobi's line of attack. If Vader doesn't know where the attack is coming from, he'll have a much harder time blocking it, so moving around like this can be helpful. I don't think Alec Guinness's movements are very convincing, again more of a beginner level, but still, there is an obvious attempt at strategy here. After a bit of dialogue, Obi-Wan knocks aside Vader's blade, but not from the side his blade is initially on. Kenobi's blade is to the left of Vader's, meaning a standard strike would come from the left. But Obi-Wan ducks his blade underneath Vader's to strike it from the right, thus subverting Vader's expectations. If Vader is defending himself against an attack from the left, he is less prepared for an attack from the right, so excellent choice. There are a few back and forths here and another few blade locks. They're not as long as the previous blade lock, but that they keep happening is worth noting and worth another demerit. Then Kenobi retreats. This is excellent. In a fight, if your attacks repeatedly fail, it is best to get away to a safe distance to try again. Kenobi made multiple attacks in a row, but Vader blocked them all, meaning Vader's defense is too strong for Kenobi to overcome in this exchange. Kenobi needs to rethink his approach, to attack from another angle or another tempo or something. If he keeps trying something that isn't working, he's just giving Vader time to counterattack and kill him. Vader has the upper hand, so Obi-Wan's retreat resets the battle, putting them back on even ground. Another bit of dialogue, but I guess Obi-Wan couldn't think of a witty one-liner, so back to the fighting. Then the longest exchange so far of strikes and blocks, some high and some low, all without any footwork of any kind. This is nothing. There's no strategy, just whack-a-mole with lightsabers. Attack, block, and so forth. I know, if at first you don't succeed, try again. But also, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Speaking of repetition, we see Vader repeat a move from earlier, pushing Kenobi back with a quick follow-up of a few thrusts. The distance doesn't seem as close this time around, as Kenobi seems quite comfortably to avoid the attacks. I say avoid rather than block, as those attacks come nowhere near hitting him. He could probably just stand still at this point and Vader would still miss. Prowse is unable to commit to his attacks, possibly due to the limitations of his costume, and is still lurching through his movements in a way that doesn't even slightly resemble a master martial artist. We see a few more thrusts from Prowse where we can see he doesn't fully extend his arms, further solidifying the point that he's inexperienced or either unable or unwilling to go all out in this fight. Again, these quick little half-hearted, half-extended jabs are very reminiscent of the timid and inexperienced. There is another brief exchange which ends with Obi-Wan repositioning to the other side of Vader. It's good that Obi-Wan is using his positioning to compensate for Vader's aggression, but the movement is still so rare and stilted. They are either moving or fighting, but never moving while they fight. Some more exchanges. We do see the blades touching here, but it's not a blade lock as neither combatant is pushing. They are just using their blades as antennae, sensing the movements of their opponent, so nothing wrong here. Then Obi-Wan raises his blade, removing both threat and defense in an act of surrender. Vader does a huge wind-up for this final strike, which is extremely bad form. It's such a huge action that even though Kenobi put himself in a vulnerable position, he could still have hit Vader before getting hit. Vader's just moving so much to do so little. Yet I can't really give any demerits for this move, as I'm sure Vader knew Obi-Wan was giving him a free hit, so knew he didn't have to worry about proper form. So, the very first lightsaber duel ever gains 9 merits and 13 demerits, thus being positive 40.1% of the time. The actors are clearly beginners. If Guinness had experience with fencing, it was minimal or forgotten long ago. The actions of both actors seem timid and half-hearted, and their lack of mobility and technical skill is painfully obvious. I will say Alec Guinness seems slightly better than David Prowse, as his movements are more smooth, though this is likely a product of Prowse's struggling with his costume. Yet some of the demerits of this duel aren't the actor's fault, but those of the fight coordinator. Peter Diamond scripted bad moves, such as Kenobi's spin move and the several blade locks, showing Diamond's martial arts knowledge leans far more towards the showy than the practical. And yet I can't say he's completely out of his element. There are legitimate moves on display in this duel. Deceptive blade work, immediate follow-ups, and timely retreats all showed Peter Diamond had some authentic knowledge to draw on. In fact, had Diamond been working with younger and more skilled actors, his choreography could have looked pretty authentic. Well, not the spin move, but for most part, I'd say this duel was better choreographed than it was performed. As such, I'm saying this fight goes to Peter Diamond, with Alec Guinness coming in second. But those are my thoughts. What are yours? Leave them in the comments below. But for now, that's all from me. Thanks for watching.